The night was colder than the city had felt in years. A strange silence hung between the echoes of sirens and the crackling fire that swallowed the streets below. Spiderman stood on the tallest rooftop, his mask torn, his breathing heavy, his heart breaking under the weight of what he had lost. The city lights flickered like dying stars, and every sound felt like a reminder of failure. Beneath the mask, Peter Parker's eyes were empty. He had saved thousands, but tonight he couldn't save the only ones who truly mattered. His aunt's warmth, his love's laughter, his friend's faith, all gone in the smoke of betrayal. The city saw Spider-Man, the hero, but behind that symbol was just a man drowning quietly in regret. The explosion had been sudden, merciless, and personal. It wasn't just an attack on the city, it was an attack on him. Someone knew his world, his people, his heart, and they shattered it piece by piece, leaving him standing in the ruins of everything he once called home. He dropped to his knees as ash fell like snow. His hands trembled as he reached for what was left, nothing but dust and memories. The strength that had carried him through countless battles couldn't lift the weight pressing on his soul tonight. For the first time, Peter wished he wasn't Spider-Man. Every whisper of wind carried a voice from the past, Aunt May telling him to be brave, MJ laughing under the rain, their voices fading into silence. The emptiness around him wasn't just the city's ruin. It was the echo of his heart collapsing inward. Pain wasn't a wound anymore, it was existence itself. As dawn approached, the city began to wake, but Peter didn't move. He watched the sun rise over destruction, his mask lying beside him, the symbol of hope turned meaningless. He had given everything to protect this place, and still, it had taken everything from him in return. He walked through the ruins barefoot, every step cutting against glass and concrete, but he didn't feel it. The physical pain meant nothing next to what lived inside him. Each breath was heavy with guilt, each heartbeat slower, weaker, hollow. When people called his name from the streets, he turned away. He couldn't face them, not after failing them. They wanted a savior. What they got was a broken man who couldn't even save his own soul. He disappeared into the shadows, unseen and unheard. Days turned into weeks. The world kept moving, but Peter remained trapped in that single moment. The moment everything burned. He didn't fight crime, didn't wear the mask, didn't care who ruled the night. The hero was gone. The man was lost, and yet, beneath the ashes of pain, something small refused to die. A flicker, faint, but alive. The voice of Aunt May, soft as a prayer. You don't stop being who you are, Peter. Even when the world stops believing in you. That whisper stayed, haunting him, reminding him that maybe. His story wasn't over yet. Days blurred into nights, and nights into endless silence. Peter wandered through the city streets like a ghost, unseen by those he once protected. The noise of the world felt distant, like he was trapped behind glass, watching life move without him. His reflection in every window was a stranger. Tired eyes, unshaven face, a man who had lost all reason to keep going. He had stopped being Spider-Man. The mask lay untouched in a dark corner of his small apartment, collecting dust like an old wound refusing to heal. His web shooters were broken, and so was he. Sometimes, he would sit for hours staring at them, wondering if the world was better without him trying to save it. Food lost its taste. Sleep refused to come. He tried to live like an ordinary man, but ordinary life was something he no longer understood. Every sound of laughter outside his window pierced through him, a cruel reminder of the peace that once filled his life. One night, as rain fell heavily against his window, Peter opened his old notebook. Inside were sketches, his first designs of the suit, Aunt May's grocery lists, MJ's doodles. Every page was a memory, and every memory a knife. He tore the book apart, but the pain stayed. He blamed himself for everything. He replayed that night again and again. The explosion, the screams, the last message he never answered. If only he had been faster. If only he had trusted less. The guilt became his prison, and every thought was a chain he couldn't break. Then came the news. Another fire, another innocent family caught in the crossfire of crime. The same helplessness returned, stabbing through the numbness. He wanted to ignore it, but something inside him refused. That faint spark from before. It began to flicker again. He walked out into the storm, without the mask, without the suit, just Peter. He didn't know what he was doing until he heard the cry of a child trapped in a burning car. Instinct took over. He rushed forward, flames biting at his skin, the heat blinding him. He pulled the child free, wrapping his own jacket around the boy's trembling body. The boy looked up through tears and whispered, "You saved me." Just 3 words, but they pierced deeper than any wound Peter had ever endured. Something shifted inside him. The world hadn't given up on him. It was still calling him, quietly, painfully. As the paramedics took the boy away, Peter stood in the rain, soaked, shaking, alive. He realized he didn't need the mask to be a hero. He just needed a reason. And maybe that small act of saving one life was enough to start again. That night, he returned home and opened Aunt May's old letter box. Among the yellowed papers was one note he'd never read before. Her handwriting trembled across the page. "Heroes don't stop hurting, Peter. They just learn to use the pain." Tears blurred his vision, but for the first time in months, he smiled. The pain had meaning again. The next morning, the city looked different to him. It was still broken, still stained with crime, but he could feel a pulse beneath the chaos, a faint rhythm of life he had once forgotten. Peter stood on a quiet rooftop, watching the sunrise stretch across the skyline. The warmth on his face reminded him that he was still here, still breathing, still capable of change. He didn't put the suit back on immediately. It wasn't time yet. Instead, he started small, helping quietly, unseen. A man lost his wallet. Peter returned it before dawn. A group of kids was being bullied in an alley. He stepped in and disappeared before they could thank him. Each act was a piece of his broken self being rebuilt. Word began to spread in the city. Stories of a silent guardian who appeared in the night, helping those no one else would. Some said it was Spider-Man's ghost. Others called him the Shadow. But Peter didn't care about the names. He wasn't doing this for recognition. He was doing it to remember who he was. Still, every act of kindness carried a shadow of pain. Every face he saved reminded him of the ones he couldn't. Every scream he silenced echoed with the voices of the past. He had chosen to move forward, but the scars would never fade completely. They were carved too deep into his soul. Then came a whisper. A name he hadn't heard in months. Harry Osborn. The world thought he died in the same explosion that destroyed Peter's life. But new evidence suggested otherwise. Peter's chest tightened. He didn't know if it was anger or hope, but the thought of facing Harry again ignited something dangerous inside him. He started digging. Files, reports, surveillance. The deeper he went, the darker the truth became. The explosion wasn't random. It was orchestrated. Harry had been part of something far bigger. A corporate war masked behind science, greed, and revenge. The lines between friend and enemy blurred once again. Every discovery dragged him closer to the edge. The pain he thought he had turned into strength began to twist into something else. Obsession. Nights turned sleepless. His walls were covered with papers, maps, and photos, the same way a broken man clings to ghosts. But even through the obsession, Aunt May's words echoed in his mind. Use the pain. Don't become it. He tried to hold on to that. Tried to remember the boy he once was, the dreamer who believed in good. But grief is a powerful current, and sometimes even the strongest drown in it. When he finally found the first lead, a warehouse linked to Oscorp's secret operations, Peter's hands trembled. He stood at the door for a long time, mask in hand, heart torn between forgiveness and fury. The night felt heavy, charged with the weight of unfinished history, and as he pulled the mask over his face again, the reflection staring back wasn't the same Spider-Man the world once knew. This was someone different, quieter, colder, yet wiser. The man who lost everything was now ready to face what destroyed him. But deep down he knew, the real battle wasn't out there. It was still inside him. The warehouse stood silent at the edge of the city, a black skeleton against the silver moon. Peter moved through the shadows, every step measured, every heartbeat steady. The air smelled of rust and betrayal, the kind that lingers long after the damage is done. He knew this place once held the truth, but what he didn't know was whether he was ready to face it. Inside, the lights flickered like dying memories. Old machinery groaned under layers of dust, and papers were scattered across the floor, files marked with the Oscorp logo. He picked one up and froze. There it was, the blueprint for the weapon that caused the explosion. At the bottom, a signature, Harry Osborn. His chest tightened. His best friend had done this. For a long moment, he couldn't move. The air seemed to thicken, the world narrowing down to that one piece of paper in his trembling hands. Anger surged, sharp and familiar, like a flame he thought he had buried long ago. He crushed the file in his fist, feeling the old rage return. This wasn't just betrayal, this was personal. Then a sound, footsteps echoing in the dark. He turned, and there he was, Harry, alive, but unrecognizable. His face was marked by scars, his eyes hollow, his voice a mixture of regret and defiance. "You shouldn't have come here, Peter," he said quietly. "You don't know the full story." Peter's jaw clenched. His voice was low but trembling with emotion. "You destroyed everything I loved. You took everything from me." He stepped forward, fists tightening. "Tell me why I shouldn't end this right now." Harry didn't fight back. He didn't even flinch. He just looked at him, a broken man looking into the mirror of his own mistakes. "Because I didn't mean to," he whispered. "It wasn't supposed to happen that way. I lost control. I lost myself." His words fell like ashes. Too little, too late. Peter's heart screamed for revenge. His mind replayed every image. The fire, the screams, Aunt May's voice fading in the smoke. Every muscle in his body wanted to strike, to make him feel the same pain. But something inside him resisted. That small echo of Aunt May's voice. "You don't heal by hurting." The silence between them stretched. Harry's eyes glistened with tears he tried to hide. "I've lived with it every day," he said. "I see their faces when I close my eyes. I came back to finish what I started, not to hurt you, but to make it right." Peter's breath faltered. The man he wanted to hate looked just as broken as he felt. Two men standing in the same ruins, both victims of their own choices. He realized then that vengeance wouldn't bring peace. It would only chain him to the same darkness that destroyed Harry. He stepped back slowly, his voice heavy with pain, but calm with understanding. "We both lost everything," he said, "but I won't lose what's left of me." He dropped the file to the ground, turned away from the fire burning behind his ribs, and walked out into the night. The cold air hit his face, sharp and clean. He had come searching for revenge but found something harder, mercy. And as the warehouse faded behind him, Peter understood the truth. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the final act of strength. The following weeks passed in a blur of silence and reflection. Peter barely spoke to anyone. Not because of anger, but because of exhaustion. His body healed from the wounds of battle, yet his mind carried scars no one could see. Forgiving Harry had not brought peace instantly. It had only opened the door to it. And now Peter needed to learn how to live again. He started small. He fixed the broken windows of his old apartment, replaced the burned photos with blank frames, and sat by the window each morning watching the sunrise. Every light that touched his face reminded him that pain was no longer his enemy. It was his teacher, whispering lessons only the broken could understand. The city outside was changing too. People had started talking again, about rebuilding, about hope. The crimes had lessened. The fear that once ruled the streets was fading. Peter began walking among them quietly, not as a hero, but as a man blending into the rhythm of ordinary life. One afternoon, he walked into an orphanage on the east side, the same one Aunt May used to volunteer at. The walls were cracked, the children hungry, but there was laughter in the air. That laughter touched something deep in him. For years, he had been saving the city. Now, maybe he needed to start saving lives, not with power, but with presence. He offered to help fix the building, clean, and teach the kids simple science lessons. At first, no one recognized him, but soon they began calling him Mr. Parker. The sound of his own name felt strange, yet healing, like rediscovering a part of himself he had buried under the mask. Every child he helped reminded him why he became Spider-Man in the first place, not to be worshipped, but to protect innocence. These small, genuine smiles replaced the ghosts that haunted him. He realized that the greatest revenge against pain is rebuilding what it tried to destroy. Then one evening, as he closed the orphanage gate, he saw Harry standing across the street. No longer an enemy, no longer hiding. He looked thinner, older, carrying the weight of remorse. Without a word, Peter nodded. Harry nodded back. No hatred, no anger. Just two men silently forgiving what time could not. They met later in a small cafe, the same place they used to share coffee in college. For a moment it felt like years hadn't passed. Harry spoke quietly, telling Peter about the charity foundation he wanted to start. One focused on helping families hurt by Oscorp's mistakes. "It's not redemption," he said, "but it's something." Peter smiled faintly. "That's where redemption begins," he replied. From that day on, they worked together. Former enemies rebuilding the world they helped break. It wasn't easy. People doubted, whispered, judged. But Peter no longer cared. He wasn't living for approval anymore. He was living for meaning. And somewhere between the quiet work and long nights, he realized something powerful. True strength isn't in how hard you fight, but in how deeply you heal. Forgiveness hadn't erased his pain, it had transformed it. What once burned him now lit the path ahead. Months passed like gentle tides washing over old wounds. The city that once echoed with sirens and screams now breathed with cautious hope. Peter walked through the streets each day unnoticed, blending into the crowd, content with the anonymity he once feared. He no longer needed to be seen to make a difference. He had learned that true heroism doesn't always wear a mask. At the orphanage, he became a constant presence. A mentor, a protector, a quiet guide for children who had known too much pain too soon. Every lesson he taught, every story he shared, carried a piece of his own healing. The kids saw kindness in his eyes, but none of them knew the depth of the sorrow behind it. Each evening, after the children fell asleep, Peter would sit by the window, watching the city lights flicker like fading stars. The world still had its darkness, crime, greed, corruption, but he no longer carried the burden alone. He had learned to trust again, to let others fight their own battles, to believe that goodness still existed even in the ruins. Sometimes, he would think of MJ and Aunt May. Their memories no longer shattered him. They steadied him. He began writing letters to them, not out of grief, but out of gratitude. "I understand now," he wrote one night, "why you taught me to forgive even when it hurts. Because forgiveness doesn't free them. It frees me." Harry kept his promise too. His foundation grew, providing shelter and education to families destroyed by the sins of the past. Peter often helped behind the scenes, repairing things, offering ideas, and guiding the children who struggled with anger, children who reminded him of his younger self. Together, they were turning tragedy into purpose, but peace didn't mean perfection. There were still nights when old memories crawled back. The fire, the loss, the screams. Sometimes he'd wake drenched in sweat, heart pounding, reliving the moment everything fell apart. But instead of collapsing into despair, he'd breathe deeply and whisper to himself, "It's over. You survived." That simple truth carried more strength than any superpower ever could. One stormy night, a boy from the orphanage came to him crying, saying he was being bullied for being different. Peter knelt, placed a hand on his shoulder, and said softly, "They'll only win if you let them change who you are. Pain is not your weakness, it's your teacher." The boy nodded, wiping his tears. In that moment, Peter saw himself, fragile, scared, yet full of potential. His quiet influence began to ripple. The children started helping one another, standing up for each other, believing that even broken hearts can still protect others. The city noticed too. People began talking about a man who helped from the shadows, fixing what others forgot. They didn't call him Spider-Man anymore. They called him Hope, and yet Peter never forgot where he came from. Every scar on his body, every ache in his chest, reminded him of the journey. He understood now that pain was not the opposite of life. It was proof of it. To feel deeply even when it hurts meant he was still human, still capable of love, still alive. That night, standing beneath the rain-soaked skyline, he whispered into the wind, "I lost everything once, but maybe that's how I found myself." The rain fell harder, washing away the lost traces of who he was. Not Spiderman, not a broken man, but a soul reborn through pain, stronger and truer than ever before. Years began to pass like chapters in a book he never planned to write. The city that once saw him as a savior now saw him as a story, a quiet legend whispered from one generation to another. People still talked about Spider-Man, but the tale had changed. It was no longer about a man who fought monsters. It was about a man who fought his own darkness and won. Peter had grown older, his hair touched with gray, his movements slower but steadier. He no longer swung between towers or chased villains across rooftops. His battles now were softer, fought in classrooms, in hospitals, in quiet conversations that changed hearts instead of headlines. The world had enough heroes. What it needed now were healers. He began teaching full-time. Not science this time, but life. To children who had lost parents. To teens who were on the edge of giving up. To people searching for meaning after tragedy. His words carried the weight of truth. "Don't run from your pain," he would tell them.